for Tuesday, November 12th at 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Peter, would you mind doing the roll call for us this time?
Ayers, Brisbane,
Here.
Tice,
Here.
Weaver,
Here.
Zierden.
Here.
All right, thank you. And may everybody arise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one
Nation.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda here is the approval or an amendment of the agenda itself. Do we have any amendments or do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. All right, and next item is the open forum. So if you're in the audience and you'd like to approach the podium to share information with us, you may do so. State your name and your address. If the item that you want to address is already in the agenda, you can wait and address us at that time. There'll be a public input for those particular items. So this is anything in addition. All right, we will close the open forum and move over to approval of the October 8th, 2024 Planning Commission minutes. Do we have a motion to approve or do we have any amendments?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I can second it.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our motion has passed. And we will move on to new business. And first up is IUP application I-24001. And we will start with a staff review.
Madam Chair, members of the board, staff report for IUP I-24001, application Nicholas Grunsky, and there is no site address on the property. The property is zoned urban reserve and it is unsewered. The applicant has filed the appropriate application. The applicant has paid the appropriate fee for the application, and public notice hearing was published in the legal newspaper, and all property owners within 350 feet were mailed notice of the hearing. Public notice was not given to the DNR as the property is not in a shoreland overlay district. The applicant is requesting an interim use permit for animal husbandry. Summary of the property includes the subject property is unplatted land that was subdivided via meets and bounds to a 20-acre tract. The property is surrounded by low and medium residential zoning districts on the north and east boundaries. The same zoning district, urban reserve, is bordered on the west, and the south side is zoned wooded residential. This property was rezoned in March 2020 from estate zoning to urban reserve zoning. Based on review of the minutes of that meeting, it seemed the primary goal was to get into a zoning district that would allow the animal husbandry use. Animal husbandry is allowed as an interim use in the current zoning district. Staff recommends the commission consider approval based on the plans submitted in the application and following the proposed conditions or any other conditions that the commission feels appropriate. Some of the recommended conditions to consider would be to have all stormwater runoff associated with the pasture area must be maintained on site. Any deviation from the submitted plan requires prior administrative approval from the city, including the planning commission. So meaning if somebody were to go in and add animal units, the applicant would have to come back before the board. Number 3, the IUP shall expire upon ownership transfer of the property or modification of the property deed, and animal units not to exceed ordinance limits. And any violation of the condition of the permit or the use of the subject property shall also equally terminate the permit. So attached in the packets is the certificate of survey and some of the definitions of, in the ordinance, copies of what the definition of animal husbandry is and the amounts allowed per acre, which is 1 per 5 acres for a horse. and then the use chart that lists the animal husbandry as a allowed use with an IUP. The applicant has also included their site sketch on the other side of the survey, and the red area shows the fence boundaries of the property. And then this zoning district also allows for an accessory structure or barn or something if they wanted to put up where it would not require a residential unit to occupy the property first. And that, again, is, I believe, why they rezoned to this zoning class. That concludes the staff report. If you have any questions, please ask.
I have a question.
Peter, what do you typically see with a interim use permit as far as a specific date for ending?
That's a really good question on that. It's something for, we see ones that go up to like 3 years and such. The big cap being on the property ownership, that it does not extend to a new owner. So I think that's a nice catch-all there. I couldn't really put a finger on a time frame for just if the current owner has it and they have their one horse, if they would need to renew it once every 5 years. That certainly would be an appropriate question if the board wanted to put a condition on there. Absolutely, yes.
From your opinion, just having the property ownership transfer be the condition without a deadline, is that?
I think that would be sufficient.
Does anyone have any other questions? All right, then we will move to invite the applicant up to the podium to present. Please state your name and address.
Thanks for your consideration. So we'd like to get this property. We have a horse, and it's been my wife's dream to have a small little farm, mini farm kind of like for her whole life. So we live close to the area, and this came up, and she had mentioned to the Bushmans before about this property years ago, so this is kind of her dream for it. And we think it's a good opportunity for us, but also for the city, because we're going to take care of the property. We're going to make sure that it's maintained well, and the outskirts of our land around the West Street and County Road 11 will be taken care of much better than it is right now. We'll keep it updated, keep the dead trees out of there, and make it look real nice. As far as the fencing goes, we're going to keep it back as far as possible from the roads. Right now, I think it's 150 from 11 and 100 from West Street. The third section over that goes to West Street is really just additional. Right now, we don't have a plan for that last part. That would be only if we get additional horse. So, and that would be the max of what we're looking for, is possibly 2 horses. Right now, it's just 1. But that last part would be added on to give the pasture more room for 2, and we'd be able to, you see there's three sections, so we move the horses, keep the grazing up. We'll put the waste back in the land, soil it up, help the soil better, so that's what we're gonna do with that. And that's really about it.
So technically, Peter, they could have 4 horses with 5 acres per a horse, right?
That's how I understand it, yeah.
Correct, yeah.
But we're not interested in that. We got two would be way, way plenty. They're kind of spendy. In your consideration, though, we would like to know, the question was arose, and I read through what I read in the packet here, was under urban reserve, once we get the approval, that is good until we sell, as long as we own the land, that is good. I don't want to spend 200-some thousand dollars on land and find out X time forward, all of a sudden I can't have an animal anymore. I mean, that's the whole purpose of us buying the land. So, I mean, I have to have that understanding.
Well, an IUP, there is a time limit on it. We were just talking about that, right?
Correct, yeah. The board could set a time, allocate 5 years where they have to come back in and re-up their
Right.
interim use permit. Just a little history on the IUP mechanism versus a CUP. That is the reason for the IUP is just so, 30 years from now, perhaps the city of Breezy Point's grown and changed in some of those areas where that perhaps might not be the best or most suitable land use. There was an opportunity for the city to end that use. That's specifically how IUPs are designed. So to answer your question, Nick, it would be, like if the board said they want it every year, if they want it every 5 years, I think on zoning review, I think it's appropriate that it definitely goes with the ownership, regardless of whether they set a condition. Like if you do sell the property somewhere else, not saying they can't do it, they would just have to come back before the board. What that attempts to prevent is, sometimes when people have approval, all of a sudden 25 horses show up, or something,
Right.
More commercial. Not that you're proposing that, but it's just so that it's very specific for,
Yeah.
and then that the city also has a mechanism where, animals in cities, have a long and complex relationship, varying in different circumstances and things like that. In some cities, like Breezy Point, where we get out to the edge of town, perhaps the lots are bigger and have a more rural view, now if somebody went like with horses right down on, say, like Lakeshore Drive, that would possibly be a lot more challenging, situation. So, the board can certainly consider a time frame on it. Zoning wise, I think it would be appropriate just to limit to any time the deed changes. But, if it doesn't get capped to time, it would just go with the deed change, And that's why we put the language in there with the deed change too, so if somebody said, well, hey, I didn't change ownership, we just changed the deed, where it's like, no, the owner's changed. Like if we added another owner to the deed, that would trigger a change too. And not a denial, but just things have changed, we better come back in and review it, so.
So you would suggest, Peter, that any time I would do something like that in the future, if that would ever come up, and I have no reason to right now, I should do that prior to making any kind of move, to get approval first. Is that what you're saying to me?
Right.
Yeah. So in other words, I'm 65, so when I'm 80 and my son's maybe gonna take over the property or whatever the case would be, I would come and get that taken care of before I put him into the land.
Exactly,
Whatever. Okay, I got
exactly.
you.
Yep.
Okay, that's fair, yeah. Yeah, I'm not looking forever. I'm an old guy, I won't be here long, so.
Well, I appreciate you asking the questions too, because we like to make sure that everybody understands what the scope is too,
Sure.
so.
Yep.
Does anyone have questions for the applicant?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
At this time, we're now open for public input to this matter, so if anyone in the audience would like to approach, feel free to come to the podium, state your name and address, and share with us.
My name is Wendy Johnson. We live directly across from the property that he's asking the permit for.
Can you state your address, please?
9023 First Avenue,
Thank you.
in Breezy. Couple questions. Did he say he's just going to have one horse for now? Okay. And is it going to be an electric fence, or is it going to be boards and, a normal wood fence? I didn't hear that part.
Peter, do you happen to know?
On that, I would defer that to the applicant to answer that question. We do have a fence ordinance, though, that already restricts the variety of fences. In an agricultural use, they are allowed to do a couple more things, like they could use electrical fence, because it's an ag-related use. But there's also fence height restrictions and such, like a fence can't be over 7 feet tall, But, I would, I guess, defer that to the applicant if
Okay.
would like to
And,
speak to that.
excuse me, the applicant said he doesn't live far away. Do you live in Delwood Acres?
Excuse me?
Do you live in Delwood Acres?
No, we live in Huron Circle.
Where?
Huron Circle,
How far is that from the property where you're gonna?
mile and a half.
About 1.5 miles. So you're not where if for some reason the horse got out, where you would know it because you live 1.5 miles away.
No, we're building a house on the property.
They are moving a home onto the property, okay? Are you going to do that prior to getting the animal?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, the animal won't be there long.
okay. That kind of answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to approach? All right, we'll close the public input and move over to the findings review. So upon review of the interim use permit application, the commission needs to consider the following findings as required under section 153.124. In review, the commission should state whether or not the following findings are acceptable towards granting the IUP. The following findings must be met if applicable. Number one, meeting the standards of a conditional use permit set forth in 153.119 of the city code. And yes, we find that the application packet, site plan, and survey appear to have met the submission requirements set forth in this section. Number two, does it conform to the zoning regulations, performance standards, and other requirements? And we find that yes, all the performance standards related to the proposed use appear to be met. Fencing will be contained in the pasture area. A manure waste management plan has been addressed, and the proposed animal units will not exceed ordinance allowances. Number three, is this allowed as an interim use in the zoning district? And yes, this use is allowed based on the city's land use matrix chart. Number four, will this terminate upon a date or event that can be identified with certainty? And yes, we've actually addressed that in the conditions, which I will repeat in a moment. Number five, will it not impose additional cost to the public? And then we find that there's no adverse cost to the public that has been noted at this time. Number six, will be subjected to by agreement with the owner any conditions that the city has deemed appropriate for permission of the use, including a condition that the owner provide an appropriate financial surety to cover the cost of removing the interim use and any interim structures upon the expiration of the IUP. With the following conditions, we find that number one, all stormwater runoff associated with the pasture area must be maintained on site. Number two, we require that any deviation from the submitted plan would require prior administrative approval from the city up to and including the Planning Commission. Number three, that the IUP shall expire upon property ownership transfer, change of or modification of the property deed, as we've discussed. Number 4, animal units will not exceed our ordinance limits. And number 5, any violation of the conditions of this permit or use of the subject property shall terminate this permit. Those currently are our findings and the conditions that we feel would be appropriate for approval of this. At this time, we will have an open discussion here on the Planning Commission if there are any questions or concerns.
So the discussion was, you don't want to put a time limit on it?
The time
Other
limit is-
than the number,
That would be up to us, but per the discussion with Peter, we don't have to set a time limit. It can be with the transfer of property or deed. We could set a time limit that would be appropriate.
still think you should have one on it.
Do you have a time frame in mind?
I was thinking 5 years, but, you know, you go 10 years, that's kind of, then it's just about a conditional. You know, I don't know. What do you think, Teddy?
I think the transfer of the property, they're obviously gonna build a home there, so their intent is to stay there
Right.
until whenever. So in my mind, there's no reason for them to come back in 5 years under a new planning commission to get a new permit that may or may not be approved. And then all of a sudden, there they sit with a horse or potentially 4, because that's what's allowed on that property.
Right.
And then, you know, we kind of put them between a rock and a hard place.
Peter, question for you. If they want additional animals on the property, do they need to, since this is submitting with one, would they come before us to get that
They
approval?
wouldn't need to, would they?
He would be all right for up to 4, I think it is, because of the 20 acres and 1 per, and then anything beyond that would then be a variance, because it'd be totally different, because they'd be asking for something not allowed by the ordinance. You know, I keep that language in there with the planning commission, not that this applicant's that way, but I've had performance with applications in the past or applicants where if there's any question, I bring them before the planning commission. You know, like if they're like, well, hey, we did it for 1, and then I just say, you know what, we're gonna go back to the planning commission because that's where we'll get that, you know. But at face value right now, you know, if he gets this IUP, they could do up to 4 horses on the 20 acres.
Or 2 horses and 2
You-
cows?
You know, yes, correct, yep.
Okay.
And you could also say, no, we want to do 1 horse or 2 horses. You could certainly do that, you know. That gets a little bit more interesting, you know, if somebody's, you know, would say, hey, the ordinance, if the IUP is allowed, they get to do these animals. You know,
Right.
but you certainly have that ability to make that determination right now, as well as the time frame too. You know, I mean, 5 years and $250 to come back in to review it could be something too. You know, I mean, the applicant largely has everything already done, you know, and that's what we used to do with VRBOs. In another place I worked at, they started at 3 years and then went to 5 years, as the VRBOs were kind of like not as big as a deal as everybody thought they were going to be, you know. And that, you know, the answer, I guess, not to be myself to be gray, but I'll take whatever you guys, if you guys want it 1 year, we'll have them do 1 year. If you want them to do 5 years, 5, 10, whichever, you know, but at minimum, the property transfer, you know, and that's also cited in ordinance too, but it's nice to have it as the condition on the front side as well, too. So.
If we wanted to, instead of a time frame, just said if there were more than, say, 2 horses on the property, then the IUP would expire and have to come back in front. So instead of it being based on, you know, it could be based on a condition.
Absolutely.
Would that satisfy what you're thinking of a need, so that if there was additional animals beyond maybe like 2 horses, that they would have to just,
Who enforces it? I asked Peter that today.
well, that's anything here that we do.
I know, yeah.
mean, that's-
All right. Seems so open-ended if you don't have a time. I know we did one several years ago on some sheep, and that thing blew up on us like really bad. So,
All good points to consider. I mean, it would, you know,
It's, I'm for it, it's just, I just
Sure,
thought there
yeah.
should be a time.
yeah. And, our applications aren't, I mean, to come back.
They're pretty easy.
To come back in every 5 years for a renewal, that's certainly,
Or denial.
yeah, absolutely. Like, a city goes through, say Bushman Road gets substantially changed and modified and stuff, and it doesn't, and at the same time too, it comes in as a housekeeping item, just submit your plan, planning commission says you're good with it, stamp, go on for another 5 years. So that is a good consideration, I think on the circumstances of the property from, this is just, I see the deed being good enough, but if you're not comfortable with that, I certainly,
I know the ones we've done in the past, I thought were 3 years we did.
yeah. And the discussion I'd be, where I'm looking at it from, which certainly, reduce the year or put a year cap on it, is just, they can't go over 4 horses anyway. So we're not opening a Pandora's box of something that's unheard of in the ordinance, And,
Right.
but as far as some of the history with some of the animal uses in the city, I might not have as much history to where,
So they wouldn't have to come back in if they wanted to get 20 chickens.
yes.
They would?
Well, that would be, that's something different. Like tonight, there is animal husbandry for horses, so, yeah, if he
Okay.
came in and said, I want to do cattle and I want to do 4 cattle, I'd say, oops, you said horses, we got to come right back to the board.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, just so I'm on the safe side, so I'm not put in making that judgment call, because I think that would be the most safe and appropriate way to do it. Not that he can't, but the story changed, like if they're now cattle, there could be some different, is it a bull? And,
Okay.
does that kind of give a little bit of,
Well, and, the condition number 2 says any deviation from the submitted plan would require approval. So
Yeah, I guess
essentially,
that's-
if there was anything, that would be the determining factor. So to me, that seems appropriate. And then along with number 3, that kind of covers our basis to make sure that if there was something that became an issue or a question because it changed from the plan, we would have that ability to review it and just make sure it still was appropriate.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, questions, things to consider?
Do we want to put horses in number 4 somehow? To make it clear? For this one?
So animals, yeah, let's not exceed.
Should we just say, we could modify it to say horse units? Is that the right wording?
Yeah, that would be a question for Peter. I don't know how he would exactly
That-
word it, but I'm just trying to think of making it specific. Being that it is interim.
That
and
number
it's-
4 condition. Just put horses and,
Horse units not to exceed ordinance limits, which would be 4, but we also said that,
Equine, it should be equine.
thank you.
So does that include donkeys?
They're equine.
Do we want to include equine?
that's a fantastic consideration. I mean, yeah, like if somebody would, if it is equine and the definition of equine is a donkey and
Right.
perhaps a donkey's loud,
That's what I'm saying, horses. That's what I,
yeah,
yeah.
Well, I kind of go back to number 2, though, any deviation from this plan. If they did add more than 1 horse and the plan says 1 horse, wouldn't that be a deviation?
I don't know what the plan
Yeah,
says,
but
one
he's-
horse though.
he said 2.
Is it 2 on the
No, it
actual?
says 1 on here, but then he said he'll probably have 2. I mean, you always want.
Not within the plan, so if we approve the plan according to item number 2, any deviation from the submitted plan would require them just to, come back in front of us and say, hey, is this okay?
Right. I just posed the question. I don't have a,
Does anyone feel comfortable making a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve I-24001, per the 5 conditions as they are stated.
Not changing number 4.
Nope.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. All right, moving on to the next item. Next item is CUP application number C24005, and we will start with a staff review.
Madam Chair, members of the board,
Good point.
application C2505, Terrence Grunhagen. Okay, property address 8959 Osmoniki Road, Lot 6, Block 1, First Edition of Sunset Strip, parcel ID 100400839, property zoned R2 unsewered. Applicant has attended the required pre-application meeting. The applicant has filed the appropriate application for the conditional use permit request. Applicant has paid the appropriate fee for the application, and public hearing notice was published to the legal newspaper to owners within 350 feet of the property. Public notice was given to the DNR via email. We received a reply back that they had no comment. The request is a conditional use permit for guest quarters, and the property is located on the North Shore General Development Class, Osawatomie Lake. The property and adjacent properties were platted as residential lots in 1969. The zoning classification for the property and adjacent properties are medium-density residential. This zoning district is a common zoning designation for most lakeshore lots surrounding the lake. This zoning district exists to allow seasonal year-round residential uses. Examples of these uses include small seasonal cabins to large residential lake homes. The R2 zoning classification also requires a conditional use permit for guest dwelling quarters in an accessory structure. The conditional use permit request only pertains to the guest dwelling within the accessory building. The rest of the building size is regulated by the accessory structure standards in the ordinance. The site topography, access, and lot configuration appear to be suitable for the proposed use and is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, which allows guest quarters in areas within the zoning classifications on lots meeting the required lot size. Based on the application's information and presentation at this time, staff recommends the commission could consider approval with any conditions that the commission would find appropriate. One recommended condition that staff has is that the guest living quarters must not exceed 700 square feet within the building. Attached in the applicant's packet are the drawings and the site plans of the property, and a lot of nice elevations, so we can get a really good look at how this is going to look out. And then also the language in the ordinance that allows guest quarters in the accessory structure, and that why 700 square feet is determined is a state standard that was come up in Minnesota Rule 6120. So I don't know why it went to 700 versus 1,000 versus 400, but that's why it says 700 in our ordinance, is to match what the state language is for guest cottage. So that concludes the staff report. If you have any questions, please let me know.
No. Looks like it's being built far enough off the lake, we don't have to worry about setbacks.
Peter, the guest quarters is going in the existing garage?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
they pulled a permit for a house to build that garage, and now they want to build their full-time retirement house or their main property. So that's the change in direction here.
Got it.
So.
Because it said existing, so I wasn't sure where this was being done at.
Are we ready to bring the applicant up?
Yep.
All right. And then moving on to the applicant review. So if we invite the applicant to come up to the podium, state your name, address, and review your case.
Good evening. My name is Terry Grunhagen, and my address is 8959 Ossawin-McKee Road. My wife and I also have a home in Minneapolis. That's considered our mailing address, and you'll find that in the application. Just a little background, we bought the property about 5 years ago, and my wife and I intend to retire, sell our home in Minneapolis, and move up here full-time. Currently, we use the garage to store our pontoon in the winter, and we have the attic space as our place to stay when we're at the lake, so to speak. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have, and I'll just open it up for that.
So, like you were saying, Teddy, the existing garage is gonna be remodeled to look like that,
We don't
no?
intend to remodel at all. The garage is built and fully
Just
finished.
like this?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the reason that we chose this route is we decided to build the garage first in 2020 and 2021. And at that time, Jerry Bonsack, I believe, Peter's predecessor, kind of guided us on the process. When we did apply to build our new home, we'd have to designate the attic space as guest quarters at that time. So we've always understood that we had to do this, and now we're getting close to the time when we want to build our home and make that official designation of the primary residence.
The new, well, I guess it doesn't really matter, but it does. The new home is going in the building envelope, the way it looks, so.
Yeah, we intend to
With the
follow.
setbacks and all
We intend
that,
to follow
so-
all setbacks with the new home.
Right.
Correct.
It's kind of nice to have one on Aussie that's actually got enough setback. I mean,
Everything seems to be in good working order here.
yeah, it looks,
So essentially, you're 208 square feet short? Is that my understanding?
No, we're under the maximum limit, is my understanding. Yeah. It has to be less than 700 square feet, I believe.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I invite anyone in the audience to come up to the podium, state your name and address, but I don't see anyone else, so we're going to close that right away and move over to a findings review. All right, so findings review. Upon review of a conditional use application, the commission needs to consider the findings as required in section 153.119E. In review, the commission should state whether or not the findings are acceptable towards granting the CUP. The following findings must be met. A, the use or development is an appropriate conditional use in the land use zone. We find that the property is zoned R2 and the request is allowed under section 153.032. B, the use or development with conditions conforms to the comprehensive land use plan. And yes, this use conforms to the standards of section 153.096, guest quarters. Number C, or letter C, the use with conditions is compatible with the existing neighborhood. We find the proposed use of the property similar to the surrounding area, which includes seasonal and year-round residential use. D, the use with conditions would not be injurious to the public health, safety, welfare, decency, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, or prosperity of the city. And we find no adverse effect to public health has been noted. Under the section 2, where following must be considered. A, the conditional use should not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the proposed permit on that property, nor substantially diminish or impair property values in the immediate vicinity. And we find that there is no injurious use that has been noted at this time. B, the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant properties for use predominant in the area. We find no adverse effect on orderly development that has been noted at this time. C, the conditional use will not create excessive additional requirements at public cost for public utilities, facilities, and services, and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. And we find no additional cost to the public has been noted at this time. D, the conditional use will have vehicular approaches to the property which are so designed as to not create traffic congestion or an interference with traffic on surrounding public thoroughfares. We find the plans proposed to use the existing city road facilities to access the on-site parking. E, adequate measures have been taken to provide sufficient off-street parking and loading space to serve the proposed use. The proposed plan is to use on-site parking. F, adequate measures have been taken or will be taken to prevent or control offensive odor, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, so that none of these will constitute a nuisance, and to control light signs in such manner that no disturbance to neighboring properties will be result. No nuisance has been noted at this time. The proposal is residential use. It's similar to the neighboring properties. G, the conditional use will not result in the destruction, loss, damage, or of a natural, scenic, or historical feature of major significance, and we find that no scenic or historical features have been documented. H, the conditional use will promote the prevention and control of pollution on the ground and surface waters, including sedimentation and control of nutrients. We find that there's no significant source of stormwater modifications that have been noted. And then the following are recommended conditions for approval. First, the guest quarter dwelling living quarters will not exceed 700 square feet. And that's the only one we have. So at this time, we will begin our commission review if there are any questions or concerns with the proposed.
Just one quick one. When they come in for the permit for the garage and there's really no, it's pretty cut and dried, isn't it, Peter?
It is, yeah, I misspoke when I said they were going to remodel the garage. I meant to say that they're transferring that use over the garage to a dwelling quarters, yeah, so they'll come in with the house for standard permitting.
Right, right. No,
Doesn't have anything to do with necessarily what we're talking about, but how were they able to build a garage? Maybe it wasn't them before their house.
They classified the house or the garage as a house because of the
I
living,
gotcha.
yep, living quarters in it.
Okay, never mind.
Yep.
Just curious how the loophole in that goes.
Any other questions? Or do we have a proposal, a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve it, C-24-005 with the one condition. I think it looks pretty good. Looks good,
Do
really.
we have any seconds?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. And moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is C, cannabis ordinance. So Peter, would you mind walking us through this?
All right, we, move down on the agenda into section 6, item C. So a little bit of background on this. The city has a moratorium on cannabis-related uses and businesses, et cetera, that many area communities have done, and that's going to expire December 31st. What means is the city will need to have rules and regulations in place. So if there is somebody that comes in to make an application for that such use, they have some guidelines to do that. The planning commissions, this didn't, because of some of the overlap and some of the absence of administration, you know, the cannabis ordinance to the city council had maybe just was waiting on the side, so it would have been, the city council has to have an ordinance on cannabis regardless. So how this involves the planning commission is it has to be represented in the land use charts as well too, in the land use. Like if there's gonna be a cannabis ordinance, it has to exist somehow in the land use ordinance, which is chapter 153, which is the spot that's in front of you guys today. Without going too long into it, administration, meaning the interim city administrator and city council, has given direction at the last council meeting and then again today during their workshop that we need these definitions in here, and essentially, basically, everything related to cannabis is going to be pretty much prohibited except to have an option for a possibility of retail sales. You know, and I know, Roger, you brought up an interesting question where if cities have to have one or not. That language is yes and no. In talking to Deb earlier, I remembered, you know, and I was able to get reaffirmed with her conversation with the city council as well too, and if she wants to speak on this matter as well too, absolutely. There's a capacity that Crow Wing County has, so like all of these cannabis retail places, Crow Wing County could trump all the cities and say, we're gonna have 6 of them, they're gonna be in downtown Brainerd, period. And then if Breezy doesn't want to have one, we don't have to have one, you know. But what this option does, in talking to the interim administrator now, I'm recalling our conversations, is we don't know what that's going to look like. You know, if we're going to get like 50 applications, 0 applications, or anything like that, and at that time, I think it will be decided. We're going with what the city of Nisswa is going with and what the city of Brainerd's going with, you know, to allow that as a conditional use permit for one that's not managed for the city, and then everything else is related to cannabis activities is prohibited. You know, if the city chooses to change that, I suppose that's, you know, obviously up to them, you know, the city council. So what we're looking for here tonight is if you guys are good with this type of language as just a recommendation to the planning commission on what you'd like to see done with chapter 153. So.
Yeah. I just thought of something, that the new garden plot out here, you can grow 18 plants, can't you? No?
Not on city.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just retail, period.
So they're not worried about people growing it?
Yeah, and then also there's
No.
the setback rules that are within this, they can't be within a residential area. So they absolutely wouldn't be able to grow it. And then also because they're, you know, right next to a park, they don't meet the setbacks, and they're also not in the zoning district. Commercial zoning district is like the only area really within the construct of our zoning and land use language that something like this can perhaps maybe fit in there. City council sounds like they're gonna ratchet it up to the most aggressive setbacks, you know, or the most restrictive ones that the state has. So, and I can get back with you with another more in-depth response onto like, but I believe that's where like the city doesn't want to close out any type of, you know, considerations of being able to consider a business like that if, you know, if Crow Wing does utilize all of the ones that they want, you know. So, Deb, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just that 6 that the county talked about goes by population. That's what the county is required to have. So if
Right.
there's 6 other retailers within the county, you don't have to have one.
Right, yeah.
But we're giving an option. 6 is the minimum.
Required to, every municipality has to.
So we're just basically setting the guidelines.
Yep,
So when someone does. Is this language similar to what other cities
yes.
are doing?
Yeah, this is taken right out of Brainerd's ordinance.
Okay,
Okay.
Yep, and the League of Minnesota Cities,
perfect.
and just,
Then I don't have any qualms.
I don't,
Well, and I see in here too, they have conditions within section like 11608 that it can't be within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare, residential treatment, playgrounds. So that kind of takes care of some of the, I think, like the park
right, yeah.
questions.
You always figure somebody's gonna try and push the limit, you know?
sure, and how this involves the planning commission too is, you know, City of Breezy Point will have a whole cannabis ordinance specifically related to that, just like, liquor licensing and things like that. What this would be is if somebody does come in and want to do one and they meet all those setbacks, they'd of course come to the planning commission first, then they'd have to go to city council to get final approval for it. So, and this is the area where this would be their jump-off spot, I guess.
And so for our job tonight, it's really just looking at this zoning document, the 153.003, and making sure that the language, the definition section, and the zoning seems appropriate. And recommend that to council, is that correct?
Correct.
And I don't know if there's more discussion, but I would make a recommendation to, make a motion to make a recommendation to city council to approve zoning changes to 153.003 as indicated in the document. Do we have a second to that motion?
I would add 153.040, 53.044.
Oh, these pages, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to modify that motion to not only include 153.003, but 153.040. Another one?
One more,
And 44.
153.044. The chart.
The back page.
And also 153.044.
I will second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. Is there any old business that anyone would like to bring forth? Any staff reports, Peter?
There is that training for the Sourcewell for introductory to zoning rules on Thursday. I can't go. I have medical commitments that I need to go. But the information I sent out is I think about a month ago. But if anybody's interested, that's going on Thursday. The city administration search is going to be starting. It sounds like the city's going to hire a professional recruitment firm to start a search for city administration candidates. And I'll update you when they get down the road with that. It's probably going to be a couple months out, before getting the finalists where they can, have the applicants. So. And then there's a couple variances that may be coming in. The deadline for next month is actually this Friday. And again, it's just been the same thing where people, it just takes a while for them to get a survey. They're still 5 weeks out on surveys and things like that. But if they can get them in here, we'll have a December meeting. If not, but I'm thinking more than likely we will have a December meeting because I'm thinking at least one of the applicants will be able to get their stuff in. So, that concludes any staff reports. If you guys have any questions on goings on, certainly let me know. I'm certain everybody saw the election results and everything like that. We're gonna have new city council mayor that's gonna take effect in January. So we'll renew our discussions with ordinance update changes and stuff like that. With that project, we put that on the side burner while, some of these administrative changes that happen, so we're not trying to do too many things at once. So that'll likely be coming back in here in January, so, yeah.
What's the time, I should know that, what's the timeline on the new building?
The new building, they've had a couple different construction-related meetings and stuff like that. It sounds like June of next year is what is being talked about, like that this will be possibly shut down fairly soon of using this building, and we've looked around to have different areas. I forget the name of there's like a conservation club in town
Oh, yeah, we could use that.
that they're looking at using for, and we would certainly look at using that, for the planning commission meetings. And there might be some resources in the police department too. I think they have a meeting area too, depending on how big it is. But yeah, the construction project's really moving along fast. So, and I think what their plans are right now is to get that done, then they're gonna shut down this and keep this, keep offices going here while this area gets updated, so.
Well, they sure have had good weather. I mean,
Really good weather.
they should be just cranking like crazy.
Yeah, it seems like it's really coming along quick, and stuff goes up fast anymore, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, some of the discussions too, with the storage of some of the materials, how it's gonna be kind of bouncing around here for the next year as the project goes.
Any commission reports? All right, meeting has adjourned.